And three, two, one. We are live. Good morning, Dhruv. Happy to see you. How are you doing?
Good morning. Good morning. I'm doing good. How are you
I'm
doing?
doing very good. So you're an early riser, or do you wake up late, or depends when you
Yes,
slept?
I'm an early riser. We have two kids, and anyone who has kids will tell you that your mornings are essentially whatever your morning was before you had kids, you have to add 3 hours to that. So I usually wake up around 6, and then it's off to the races from there.
So there's something I want to read out,
Yeah.
and it's
So, so firstly, before you go anything, I want to say something to
yes,
start this
please.
off, which is firstly I want to congratulate you on this thing that you've got going. So we've known each other for a few years
Yes.
now. Played together in the Voyage project, and since then, you've obviously done a lot of things and different things, but you've got this education thing going now, and you've taken on this new role of being an educationist. I have to say, it's absolutely fantastic that what you're doing, man. I have to congratulate you on it. I've seen a few of your episodes. It's absolutely brilliant. You're taking the information and you're making it, in a non. I think it's the way you're taking the information and sort of sharing it. It's absolutely wonderful. Yeah. So
Thank you
congratulations
so
on
much,
this,
Dhruv.
you
And
Avtar.
I want to say you are one of my biggest inspirations. And this is not because I'm talking to you
Oh,
online or anything, but
yeah.
you are a person I just listen to randomly sitting in the house, play your music. That day I sent you a video also because I want to listen to the album in all kinds of fancy speakers, monitors possible. So we were at Allen City and we played Dhruv Voyage, a little part of it. I was just showing it to Usher.
Yeah.
And you've been an inspiration. I'm somewhere inside me, if I think about you, when I see you doing live gigs at the level that you uh, do it at, and then of course you have your parallel huge business going on where you're producing music, advertising, scoring, and everything. So coming back to the point where I was saying I want to read something out,
Yes.
and this is
Yes.
actually from your interview with Vasundhara from a book, Big Dreams, Bold Choices. You said a
Yes.
very interesting thing. I read and I just read the interview and I was running around in my house constantly. Like, what is going on? There's so much bombs, so many bombs you've dropped in there of information. So here's how it goes. You were talking about from situation to situation, you choose which hat to wear. Studio contract signing, negotiations, and you switch accordingly. Musicians have to remember that if you don't have the discipline of working in a system with a hierarchy and a schedule, the discipline of waking up early, doing certain things before you go out, you're going to find it very difficult to be successful in music. You can't be a bum and expect stuff like wake up at 12, go smoke a joint. It doesn't work like that. All kids coming in today are very relaxed. They carry that band ethos or vibe, and it doesn't work. You have to have a professional attitude. That's what attracts people. So
Yeah.
this was really interesting for me when I heard it, and through my process of trying to learn music and hearing a lot about many perspectives, many philosophies. The only people I see succeed, the only people I see build empires, people like you, are people with discipline, are people who have a thing going on. They have a routine going on. No matter what, they are doing stuff. When you started out as a musician, now of course this is a discipline you developed over a period of time, that I need to understand that when I'm waking up, I have to finish this much because I have Blue Frog running or I have my production house running. I have to figure all that out. Then, even helping
Yeah.
your family out, XYZ. So, the struggle for an artist, for a musician to become successful is after a point, it's not so much of art, but it becomes of these things as to how one should execute or one should start manifesting their dreams. For you, the first habits that you developed, the day you realized first time that I have to finish XYZ before I go out to chill with my friends. What was it? Do you remember when it began for you?
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. So I think the seeds of it were already in the way I was in my upbringing or whatever you want to call it. All of us come from middle class families and in varying degrees, and we are taught by our parents essentially that being an artist or a musician is like akin to being a bum. So even though I came from a very hip family, my dad was a filmmaker, and we were influenced by a lot of hip things for our age, whether it was music, art, film. But there was always a fear at the back that if you're going to do music, you're going to turn out to be a bum. So I had heard that 100 times, through my school and college days. When the switch happened, when in college, I started having an image of what a life would be like to be a musician. And I remember I applied to music college. I applied to Berklee when very young, when I was like maybe 17 or something. I started having these dreams. So I would open the catalog and sort of imagine myself being there. And I immediately realized that there is no way that I'll be able to do anything without first getting my life in order. So which meant that, I had to learn music firstly, to, learn the bare bones of the mechanics of what makes music. So I also, realized whatever music I'm listening to now may not be relevant 10 years from now. So this is an epiphany that I had very early in my life. And, a lot of kids, come to me for advice. They want to be DJs and they want to be aspiring composers, guitar players, whatever. I mean, the most important thing to remember is whatever we are listening to today may not, and whatever your gateway might be into music. For me, it was like rock and roll, like all like sort of fusion and jazz, and jazz was already like considered to be dead music in the 90s. Nobody really, I mean, there was not really a market for jazz, but whatever our gateway, your gateway is to eventually start making music, which is going to be like 10, 15 years from now. And if you're like 16 years old or 14 years old, music will change. So what you're listening to now is essentially whatever it may be, EDM or techno or some variant of pop music. It's going to change by the time you grow older. So to learn the mechanics of music is super important. And to learn the mechanics of music, you need to be disciplined. There's no way. There's no way around that.
What was your discipline like when you were, learning all this, getting all this information? I heard in an interview with Sudeep on Sudeep Audio channel, where you were mentioning that there was this time you would go around looking for books, theoretical material, before you had a teacher. So when you were studying music, when you were trying to figure out your instrument properly, what was your process that time? How were you practicing?
So when I finished, when I was right through college, I didn't really have a practice schedule as such, because the guidance that I got was not, it didn't have any structure. The structure came in only after I went to music school, honestly, So, but before I went to music school, I had already done a lot of things. So I used to write a lot of music. So with my band Chakravyuh. So being creative and writing music was already something I did from day one. I didn't start doing it after I went to school. I also started scrambling around for like music theory information, which was very, very, very difficult to find in those days. There was no. This is pre-internet. This is 92, 93. So everything I was playing until that point was very visceral. It was not coming from a place of it was not academic at all. I didn't understand half the things I was doing. I mean, most of it actually. So I was hearing sounds, figuring out the geometry of the sounds, as guitar players do, and then trying to make, either hooks or, make some kind of a compositional thing out of it. And it was, it was very rudimentary, but, we did some pretty cool music, for its time, back in the 90s. Right after. It was only when I went to music college is when they kind of, when you see how they teach you the music and they put a structure together, you go, my God, okay, this is how you do it. And it becomes a lot easier, having that structure in place, which is you do 15 minutes of this, you do 20 minutes of that, you do half an hour of this, you do 1 hour of, whatever, sight reading, and you do this every day. And if you do it for long enough, that essentially becomes like a 2-hour schedule, which you do in the morning. I mean, I don't do it anymore. I have to be, I'm guilty of that now. But I did it for a very long time. And I used to also practice a lot when I was, young. I would practice for close to 12 hours. at one point. So I would wake up in the morning and essentially play the whole day. And that continued when I went to music school also. So even when I was in MI in the late 90s, we would finish our classes in the morning and then I would play for 6 hours after that, like maybe from like 1 o'clock to like, 7, 8 in the night. And, sometimes forget to eat dinner. So, you go and grab a donut and a coffee. That's all the money you had. You only had enough money to buy yourself that. So you put in a lot of time and effort in your young days and doing difficult stuff. It becomes easier because you've already filled your well with so much of information, and that it overflows. And when it overflows is when you get the feeling that, okay, now I need to get out and start playing and doing things. Automatically, whatever you do will sound fantastic because you filled your well with so much of information, and so that's how I went about it. Yeah.
So the structure aspect, do you think that in our country the information is available, but somehow it's available in bits and pieces, and it's not that it's not the right information. Now it's available properly. A lot of people teaching. There's a lot of YouTube videos.
Yeah.
But do you think this structural aspect as to what to do, we know what to do, we know what we need to practice. But when you're mentioning that how we need to practice it, how we need to step into reading, spend time with technical exercises or improvisation or whatever it is, do you think that's missing and should be something that should get added in some sort of a structural school or something like that?
I would imagine schools here teach it. I don't know what their syllabus is and how they go about teaching it. But it's taught everywhere else in the world. I mean, a structure of practicing is not something there's no secret. I mean, and honestly, it's a very poor excuse now if you can't find that structure because there's so much information available now. It's in fact, we have an overload of information. I feel that sometimes there is too much information, and that's also that can be detrimental too, because you get distracted by, not being able to decide what to do first. But right. I think limiting yourself to just a few things and working on those few things, it's kind of like a samurai swordsman, a master swordsman. He wants to make, he spends his entire life making one blade, and he's just doing that, and that's his job. So if you want to be a phenomenal, bass player, bassist, or a drummer, then essentially you need to, spend a lot of time doing that. Though, in today's day and age, being a specialist is not enough. You need to be a package. You need to be more than one thing, unless you are an exceptional drummer or an exceptional, painter or an exceptional guitar player. If you are not in the top 5 or top 10, you're going to find it very difficult to be, counted or to be noticed.
So you're talking about, of course, wearing multiple. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's absolutely valid, and I understand totally. Even when you talk about things or, everything available in too much quantity. Like for me, when we had the times when we used to have certain number of cassettes, I know those lyrics in and out. Right now, I don't know lyrics to many songs.
Sorry, your voice is broken.
Can you hear me now? Check test. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now it's better.
Okay. I think there was a drop in the connection. So I was asking that when we talk about information particularly, I realized because we have the internet, we have all these things going on, we have streaming and everything available. And then I also heard this suggestion from many people that they listen to an album a day, and it's a good thing to do that, listen to an album a day. When I had restrictions in terms of how many cassettes I had in my house, I knew those cassettes, even the song is going to come after this is the transition, these are the lyrics.
Exactly.
So as a new practice, what I started eventually was that, like right now, if I'm working on, let's say, gospel bass playing, I wouldn't indulge myself into an album. I'll pick up a song and that's it. Not gonna look left or right. I'm just going to step into it and go into the details of it, that how's the pocket moving, what is the structure of this song, how do they feel time, what are they up to. And it's been much more rewarding rather than, just thinking that, oh shit, I have to listen to this album, that album, I have to listen to more to become better at this and that. But what happens is that if you learn one thing properly enough, you're just, the next one becomes easier, and then the next one is even easier, and it just, the pace keeps on increasing. So as an individual, you just mentioned that one needs to wear many hats, and you are constantly developing yourself. If it comes to music, it comes to tech, whatever it is, you're always, you know your stuff, you know what's the latest in the market, and you're at it. Now, I wanted to ask you, how much are you doing this strategically? Because even when you wrote Dhruv Voyage, there's a lot of influences of African music and everything else, and then it's clubbed with a lot of production, and it's magical. The whole thing is a very, very solid experience of who you are as a person. You can see discipline in it, you can see musicality, art, and everything. Now, how
Yeah.
are you adding all this to your musicianship? Are you consciously sitting that I'm going to explore African styles and then add it? What do you do for that?
Not at all. Not at all. So it's something that I've had on my back for a long time, which is you are essentially a manifestation of your environment, and for better or for worse, when we are from, which is in India, we are influenced by a lot of things. We listen to Indian film music, which is its own different language, which is kind of a hybrid between Western pop and ghazal and all these different traditional art forms from Indian music. Then there's also all the other stuff which you listen to from the West, which is jazz and whether it's hip hop or whether it's R&B. Then there's all this other world music, which is from Africa and Middle East and Balkan countries. So we tend to get exposed to a lot of stuff which maybe perhaps my friends in America may not get influenced by, unless they're like ethnomusicologists, or they're looking for music from different cultures. But because we are from where because we are from India, I feel that our ears kind of firstly are, at least for me, melodically, it was very easy for me to listen to Arabic music, because the way the music operates, and the way the language of the music is there, they have microtonal music, and we've already heard that or been influenced or heard it at some point in our youth, whether it's Indian classical or whether it's Carnatic music. African music, the rhythms are very similar. A lot of the patterns and a lot of the rhythms are 6/8 based patterns, which are kind of very prominent in Indian music. Arabic music, the same thing. So I mean, I kind of got interested in all this stuff. There was not some marketing strategy where I have to find this stuff. It was I was kind of curious, and I've always been a curious mind. I love listening to music from different places. I really don't know why. My mom makes fun of me. She's like, you listen to all this weird music. Why can't you listen to like normal music like normal people? And I'm like, and whenever I come home, I would come home when I was in college or school, I would play some, cassettes or a CD of some really obscure artist who nobody's heard of, So they would, and my parents would be like, "What the hell is wrong with this kid? You can't really listen to like normal music." So I mean, I kind of always had that, what do you say, kida to listen to, music from different parts of the world. All that kind of, started churning and becoming this thing, And I think when you kind of meet artists and when you want to start collaborating with artists, you kind of hear what they do. And like for me, at least, when I met Ilaji, and I've known her for a very long time, and when I hear her singing, I kind of felt that there was something in the way she was singing and her melodies, which I could, put against that other thing that I had heard. So there are certain albums that you would listen to, like you were talking earlier, which you would spend a long time listening to. So, when you spend a long time listening to a particular music, it goes inside your bloodstream, so to speak. It goes inside your DNA, and you can hum those rhythms, you can hum those melodies. You start hearing those the harmonic vocabulary, and even though you may not have worked out the songs, actually transcribed and worked it out, it becomes part of your the way you're listening to music.
Yeah.
So when I'm collaborating with an artist, and especially with an ethnic artist like Ilaji or with Mame Khan or whoever it is, I always tend to kind of juxtapose what they are doing against something else. Like for me, that's interesting, you know. And I'm trying. I don't do that consciously. I let it come to me. So I kind of, you know, step back and hear what they're doing. Though in the case of Voyage, some of the songs were actually conscious. So I'll give you an example. Dhima Dhima, which I did with Ilaji. That was something that I've been wanting. So I was listening to a lot of Tinariwen guitars at that point, you know, the African, the Mali guitar players.
Yeah.
And I spent like about 2-3 years listening to their music. I got like, you know, obsessed. You listen to something and then you get obsessed with it.
Yeah.
And then you spend like 2-3 years listening to something, and then that's all you listen to for a while. So there was a lot of that. I was listening to that, and then I listened to another great artist who I worked with, Karim Ziad. You know, I heard his album. He was actually introduced to me by this great drummer called Joey Heredia. So I was recording my first album in LA, and with Joey, and I was recording with him, and he just came and gave me this CD. He said, "I think you like this guy. He kind of, you know, I'm hearing your music, and I think you might like him." And I immediately heard Ifrika for the first time. I was like, my gosh, this is what I've been like, you know, this is everything that I've been always wanting to do, but he's doing it with such sophistication because, you know, it's got all this harmonic stuff going on, and it's got all these rhythmic stuff, and he's singing in, you know, his language. I'm like, my God, why can't we do this? So I think Voyage was kind of, you know, it was on a slow burn for a very long time. And when I started then looking for collaborations, I already knew what I wanted to do just by listening to all this stuff. So Dhima Dhima was born out of, you know, juxtaposing Ilaji's voice against Tinariwen guitars. I said, let's just see what happens if you do that. You know, you have this West African sound, but it's also a very desert sound. It's got this Arabic sort of, you know, lilt to it. But, you know, so is desert music from Rajasthan. That's also desert music. So there is a geographic element to that also. So there are a lot of similarities. If you if you really listen to a lot of stuff from around the world, you will find stuff which you will find threads rather, which kind of meet somewhere. And if you listen carefully, I think that's the main thing. You have to kind of spend some time listening to stuff carefully. You know, you'll get those aha moments. You'll go like, okay, you know, this, and then you become like a DJ. And that's where I see it. You know, why can't I use this and that? And then you put these two things together. Okay, we could do that. And you literally orchestrate it in your head for a while. And then there's the physical task of actually getting people to play what you're thinking, which is, you know, you write a demo and then get people to replicate it.
So I have heard about your process of writing, where you, at least for a song, you would write at least 7-8 songs. Is that what you do often, that you want to execute, manifest your ideas multiple number of times, and then from there you will choose one?
I do that with certain artists, with certain people. I think recently I've been doing it a lot more than I used to earlier. I think as you get older and as you get wiser, I think your patience level also increases. So, and you know, having kids is another one of those wonderful things where your patience is tested on a daily basis. So I think as I've gotten older, I've kind of also become more critical of my own art and trying to also push myself deliberately. I mean, it can be sometimes a bit unhealthy, so you have to be careful about it, because you tend to reject a lot of your ideas, even though they're good. So, and especially for composers, composing is a really lonely game, because you sit alone by yourself and, you know, you essentially banging away at a keyboard and looking at a computer screen all day, and you'll spend, you know, sometimes weeks doing that. So you know, and without a lack of a bouncing board, you tend to the only person you have to, you know, talk to is yourself. So you tend to you can tend to be a little hard on yourself. So with certain artists, I do tend to write more than one variation. If I'm producing a song, for example, I'm sometimes made, you know, kind of, well, there's like, the way I like to think of it, there's always more than one way of skinning the cat. So, and production and arranging is essentially the dressing that you will give to a melody. and you can dress that melody in so many different ways, But sometimes the first thing that you do can be absolutely boom, bang on. And that can come from inside, when you have a very strong sense of where the song needs to go, it will manifest in the first thing in your first draft of the first version that you do. In which case you will not need to go, you won't need to go, more than that. I mean, you've seen it with the Voyage project that we did. We would work on stuff, and then I would throw an arrangement at you guys, and a few months later, the arrangement would be completely different.
Yeah, another one used to come in that now we'll do this song like this.
Yeah, so I mean, that's also an exercise for me to, creatively see if there's another way of doing things. And there's always more than one way of doing things.
When you're doing your own work, which is not given to you by somebody else, do you give yourself deadlines that I must finish writing an album or a single in a week or in a month? Do you give yourself deadlines?
Unfortunately, I don't. That's been a problem. I think it's a problem for all of us. I speak to so many composers, singers, songwriters. You have to give yourself a deadline. I did it the last time with Voyage. I made a promo for the album, and I put the promo out, literally, and that became my deadline. And I was like, I have to finish this now by December. And I did finish it by December. But then we took 3 months to push the album out. We had to make music videos and blah, blah, blah. But I think putting a deadline and just sort of, drawing a line in the sand definitely is super important. I mean, I do that on a daily basis when I'm asked to come, and I do commission music, because I know very clearly that I have to finish something by the end of the day because somebody is coming to my studio to hear it. But in the case of your music, there's nobody coming. So
do you see productivity as finishing stuff and trying to, let's say, put a tick on the goals you've written for the day? Do you see it as a practice that everybody should get involved in getting shit done? Because sometimes, especially when people do not step into a job, let's say, a regular job, a daily job where you're given tasks on a regular basis, you skip that whole world and you straight away step into, let's say, playing indie music or an instrument or become a session musician. So this habit that you might have picked up from a workplace of getting shit done, you might not have picked up. And then when you're in your art world, your little bubble, you're thinking nothing's happening and shit is not coming together. I feel like doing this, I want to do this, but it's not happening. Do you look at it as a practice that being productive, being able to achieve your goals is actually a practice and not a miracle?
I think it is. I mean, it should be, and it can be. And I think the question is, when you're doing stuff for yourself, again, coming back to what we were saying earlier, it's harder to put those, benchmarks for yourself, because essentially you're your own boss. And if you don't have that discipline of doing it, then it will be very difficult for you to do anything, actually. I mean, that's one of the things that people don't realize about being a musician, or even musicians don't realize, for that matter, is that you are your own CEO, your own CFO, your own COO, your own accountant, your own marketing manager, you're everything. So you're fulfilling all those roles for yourself. And there's going to be nobody else who's going to do it for you. So you have to do it for yourself. And a lot of people, go into doing music to escape from their, mundane lives or whatever else that they were doing, without realizing that this is all those things that you will have to do there in a corporate structure, you'll have to do it in when you're doing music today, because essentially the whole music business has changed, from the time in the last 20 years. So I think having that discipline of putting things in your calendar, which is have to finish by whatever date it is, whether it's a week from now or 3 days, I think it's super helpful. Yeah. You'll never finish stuff. It's impossible to finish stuff. I mean, I'm guilty of the same thing. I take way too long to finish stuff, because I tend to overthink things, or you want to try and do the song and perfect something a little more. But honestly, this is something that I heard a long time ago, is that you never finish a song. You have to abandon it. You have to let it go in first. So you never ever finish it. Especially with your own stuff. never ever will finish it. So you have to just kind of let it go. And I mean, Joe, who mixes all my stuff, will tell you I'm a pain in the ass when we are mixing the album, because I take like sometimes I'll take like 2 weeks to mix a song. It's just ridiculous. It's and especially because I have my own place, and sometimes you want to really like refine stuff and get into it. And a lot of times, like for me, mixing is also a lot of subtraction more than addition. It's very rare that I will add stuff in the mix stage. It does happen, but it's very rare. It's mostly subtraction. And you want to keep subtracting, and so it's sort of like chiseling. So you want to kind of create this stone statue, and you keep chiseling away at it. So I think having a deadline is healthy.
Loy was saying this, that the mix is final only after the song is released. That's when the mix is final. There's no final mix before that. So
there is no.
The production aspect of things, this mixing and all that, did you study this as well when you went to MI, or you just studied performance there?
No.
How did you learn all this?
On the job, I guess, yeah. So, I've spent a long time, Ashutosh Phatak, who used to be my partner in Blue Frog, and then we were a team before that, known as Ashu and Dhruv. So we did a lot of work together, and I started off kind of, co-composing with him in mid-90s, 96, just as I got out of college. Knew nothing about music production, went in to literally do a guitar session with him, and landed up, contributing to the writing aspect accidentally. And we kind of had a good rapport, we hit it off, and we were kind of diametrically opposite people in our personalities. So we got along, really well. We had a great session. Came back a few days later, drew another one, and the ball kept rolling. And then we kind of, formalized our, working relationship. And then we just essentially, we had a lot of success in the beginning of our career. We did a bunch of movies, Bombay Boys being one of them. And in doing all this stuff, you just learn on the job, literally. We were winging it. And honestly, production is a strange thing, because now it's being taught in schools, and what you're essentially teaching people is how to create a style of music, which honestly even the people who did it will tell you that they didn't know anything. They were winging it. So, and there are great producers like Quincy Jones who don't contribute to any playing in the album. Like, he will not play anything in the album, but he's a phenomenal orchestrator of people. And he's great at casting people. So production is a strange thing, because I mean, I never learned it formally, but I have deep respect for producers. I love producers, and I admire people who do like sonically create stuff and design stuff. Never learned it though. I came in from a very different angle. I came in as a guitar player, and I always believe that if you're a good composer, and if you have your own sort of own style of doing things, and if you study enough styles of music, you should be able to create anything. And that's one of the things that advertising teaches you. If you want to, like, one day you'll be called to do a hip hop track. One day you'll have a Beyonce track as a reference, and you have 24 hours to create it. So it's like a college assignment, really. And in the early days, we were winging it. Yeah, sure. Like you do when you're young. But as you keep doing it, you get better at it. And we did a hell of a lot of work. We did like over 2,000-3,000 commercials, in those first 10 years of our career. We were working 360 days a year, no holidays. Like, literally, we were working Sundays. Sometimes doing like 2-3 jobs a day, day and night. We would sleep in the studio. Did that for a very long time before we, decided to expand and set up Blue Frog. So just having all that, cutting our teeth and having all that work experience before you did your own music, I think it helps, because it kind of, it helps you chisel your own craft and perfect things in a way, once you get out and start doing more serious stuff, you feel that you're ready. You definitely feel more ready to, take on bigger challenges. Yeah.
So this success that you built, which was through production, advertising, doing scoring, and then comes Blue Frog after that, which is basically the next big venture that you stepped into. You created that whole place. Now, do you think it's easy for any human being once they understand how to build successfully? What's happening? Okay, it's back. Something up with the OBS broadcast software today. Never mind. So my question was that when you built one successful story for yourself, where you worked hard 360 days a year, you put up, you created all these scores and all this amazing stuff. Now comes your next aspect, where you're taking, or rather you build a foundation of success for yourself.
Yeah.
Is it easier for any human being to build another success story if they have already had one? And how much
100%.
of a financial contributor was it that you saved up enough that you could invest into a club and be a partner in it?
No, so it wasn't as simple as that. We didn't save up enough uh, to to design the club. The Blue Frog story is a long story. I don't think we'll have enough time to cover that, but it's an incredible story.
Dhruv, we have time.
It was the Blue Frog.
I'm okay if you want to share it. We have time. There's no problem.
I'll give you a snapshot of how it went down.
Sure.
So back in 2005, 2006, Ashu and I had this crazy idea of getting all the composers together in Bombay and setting up a structured system for working and creating, standards and ethics and practices by which all composers could be unified. So until then, in our business, and it's kind of still true a little bit now, though it's a lot better, there was no real structured way of composers getting paid, and what they were getting paid was sort of very ad hoc. There was no real system in place. We did some amount of international work in the early 2000s, and we realized immediately when we did it that the way they worked in the West is so different from the way we work here. They have standards there where people would get paid, firstly, a lot more, and secondly, even if they didn't get paid a lot of money upfront, there was a way of getting what you call residuals then from collection agencies. None of that existed over here. So we thought of kind of starting a discussion with composers and sort of let's start discussing how we can sort of make this a little better for us. It started from there. So the first avatar of that didn't really work out. Everybody had their own ways of wanting to do things. People were insecure. They were like, oh no, if we align ourselves, and how do I know how much I'm going to make? Blah blah blah. Didn't work. Fell apart. Then we kind of decided, to still go ahead with it and figure out a way of doing it, and decided to do a little more than just what we were discussing, which is maybe then set up some studios and expand our company back then, which was called Smoke. So Smoke, we had 2 studios, and we had a few composers working with us for the company. So Harmeet Manseta and Sanjay Divecha and Vivek used to also compose through the company. So this was essentially we were doing so much work at that point that there was so much of residual work that we started saying no to. We said we may as well, start building teams together and, sort of having other people also contribute, to us and to the company. So essentially we kind of we built the first music production house in the country without even knowing it. And found some moderate success in that, and then decided maybe it was time to get out of where we were. We were in a decrepit old place in Dadar. We said, let's get a nice place and actually make this nice, like how it is in the West. So Ashu, he had a friend in Singapore, and then he raised the money for Blue Frog, and so there was a sizable amount of money that we raised, and it was not a small amount. But the vision was really to set up 4 studios and to expand Smoke, which was our company. And then we stumbled upon this place, and the place which became the club. And we were like, wow, this is amazing. But maybe it's too big for us. But we don't want to leave this. We don't want to lose this space. So what do we do? And then that evening, few days later, we were having drinks with Mahesh and Srila, and we kind of spoke to them about it and told them about this place. They came and saw it. They loved it. They said, "Fuck it, let's just do a club," And that's how the idea was born. And then it took about 9 months of planning to, formalize what we really wanted to do. And then we got people on board to manage it. We got Rahul and Malini from Indigo to come and design the menu. So the venture immediately became far bigger than what we had initially planned it, what we had planned. And the search for a studio was ongoing while we were designing the studio. Designing the club. I'm sorry. And one day we had come to do an inspection of the club as the work had already started. There was like cement and things were kind of going into place. And I saw a space right next to the club, and there was a shutter that was half open, and I walked in and I saw it, and it was this beautiful, but again, old space right next to the club. So that we kind of found out about this place, and we said, wow, this would be amazing if we can get this place. But there's no way we're going to get this place because it's too good to be true. Sure enough, that we were managed to formalize and close that, and then that became the studios. So we set all this up very quickly, like in maybe 1.5 years, and we were off to the races. Then after that, things just kind of took on, its own turn. I mean, it was far more than what we had initially imagined. We thought this club would be like this small place, could, play the music that we wanted to play, and finally bring artists and friends that we had, people we had met all over the world, either at jazz festivals or I had played with in various points in time, and ask them to come and invite them to come over. And it was really born out of that. The idea was really that simple and that sincere. And immediately, the first night we had an electronic DJ. There were like some 900 or 1,000 people at the club, and everyone tasted blood and they were like, why the hell are we having jazz music on a Friday night when we could be having like 1,500 people, coming here? So programming obviously got changed, after a year of running the way we were running it. And then it kind of became this multi-purpose place where we started having stand-up and electronic music and jazz and all these other genres coexisting at the same time. So it wasn't like we had designed it from the very beginning. As all things it evolved into becoming what it was. So it took some time to become that. And then, within a few years, we kind of got a lot of traction, even internationally, because the word had spread in the music community, in the music agencies around the world, that there's this hot new place in this place called Bombay in India. That and people started talking about it. So, people wanted to come to Bombay to play in Blue Frog. That kind of became like this thing. And then, of course, we started getting CDs from bands all over India, like from the Northeast and Delhi and all kinds of places, actually, small places, that please, can you have us play? If you want to play at your club, we thought it's great. So the programming team, they took it upon themselves to dedicate one night for new and emerging artists. And then we made a showcase slot for young singer-songwriters. So all these things kind of evolved, as time went by. Yeah.
So here's the question that I personally faced a lot before starting the School of Bass, or just starting something that is a venture of mine. I look at it as a company, I look at it as an education website, and many other things that I want to do with it in the future.
Yeah.
Now, I could not ever think or dream creating anything big or anything substantial. My dream was that I'm going to learn how to play bass, I'm going to learn how to read charts, I'll learn the songs fast, I'll execute them, and I'll keep playing sessions one after the other, one band after the other band, and one gig after the other. That's the life I could imagine, maximum. In your case, you as a guitar player, you learn guitar, you start a whole journey as an advertising person, then you dream even bigger. You dream of starting a club, a company, you call it a company, you start stepping your uh, stepping into these places where it's not, sometimes if you look at it as that I'm an artist, I'm a musician, I won't get into business, it's something else. What do you think stops a musician or artist or any creative from stepping into these zones, from stepping into looking at his art as a product, as a venture, building it successful, making it big, and then of course making something even bigger like you did? What is it that people are not able to expect great things out of themselves?
So first thing I think you have to understand is that when you want to do something that's outside your area of expertise, you have to be willing to collaborate and partner with other people. You don't try and do everything yourself, first of all. That's number one, I would say. The problem is that we believe and we think that we can do everything ourselves. And you look at certain people and say, wow, he's doing so many things. They're really not. They have people either working for them directly. If you have a lot of equity, you could hire people to do it, or you partner with people, kind of complement you complement you in areas where you don't have expertise. So an undertaking like Blue Frog, I certainly we would never have been able to do, and unless we had partnered with people that we partnered with, and we hired people whom we hired. So it was a massive operation. At one point, we had over 100 people working for Blue Frog, and that was for many years. So it is a huge undertaking to build a company, and it's not something that we can, you can dream about it, yes, sure. But then when you get down to actually doing it, and when you start figuring out how it really has to be done, you will not be able to do it alone. So you have to.
Did you face self-doubt when you were starting this venture?
100%. I mean, like I told you, so the previous avatar of Blue Frog, it didn't work out, but we didn't stop there. We said, screw it, let's just try and do it another way, because we had a belief in what our initial plan was, and perhaps even that didn't work out. Our initial plan was to create a collective of music composers in India, and that was kind of the initial plan. So when Blue Frog, at one point, if you remember, we had started a music label, and we had the 4 studios were essentially built to service music composers. So the studios were a physical space for composers. I mean, that was the only function of the studios. The studio as a business is a crap business. I wouldn't recommend that to anyone, because it's essentially a rental business, and a rental business with the amount of equity that you'll put into the studio, which will be close to 1 crore rupees today. Then you have to look at your returns and see whether it's really that, whether it's viable, and then what else can you do with that money. So a studio is not a great business. For me, it's great because I service it every day. So I'm there every day and I work every day. So it's essentially my office. But whatever your dreams are and whatever it is that you want to do, you should first, I would say, make a business plan out of it, or at least make a 1 or 2 pager or a 5 pager.
So
if there's more than one, sorry. So let me just finish.
Yeah.
So if there's more than one vertical in your business, if you have a plan of making 1, 2, 3, whatever those verticals are, flesh out each of those verticals in whether it's in a 1 page or a 3 or a 5 page. And each of those verticals, if they are outside the purview of your understanding and your expertise, then you start looking for partners or people you can collaborate with who will bring value to what you want to do.
So this understanding of starting a business, first of all, right? Where did you adopt it from? Because was it people around you that were already kind of enterprising and they were building businesses, that you even thought of being a business person or thinking of businesses? It makes sense when you say that you have to understand what your ventures are, what you want to start. Things you understand, things you don't understand. If you don't understand something, if you want it as a business, you need to get partners on board and we execute it. But taking a few more steps back, think about, like for me, I learned from that business is possible, or doing something else apart from just playing live is possible from books. That I started reading books somehow. I came across a book called Click Millionaires, and I understood how the online world works. Then I started thinking, then I understood the concept of a niche, and then I understood, okay, I need to create something specific in Hindi for bass players in our country, which doesn't exist. And things
Mm-hmm.
started
Yeah.
moving forward from there. So my family, my parents, both were in jobs, and we never had this concept of you start something of your own. So
Yes.
again, that vision, the first seed, where did it come from? Did you read? Do you read books? I saw a bunch of books in your house when we rehearsed there. A lot of biographies, particularly from musicians like Miles Davis, and a lot of other
Yeah.
books were there. So how much of a contributor was your environment in building that trust that Dhruv, you can start something, it might fail, but then resilience kicks in, you get up again, you start again. Where were you adopting these ideologies or philosophies from?
So I think it's firstly it's easier said than done. It's not easy at all. In fact, I don't even recommend any. If you want to be an artist, it's going to be very difficult for you to put on a business hat. I struggled doing it with Blue Frog. I have to be very honest. And I actually we burnt out very quickly. So and my day in when we were doing Blue Frog was extremely challenging because I would have partners meetings, board meetings. We would have various kinds of meetings throughout the day, and then I would have to go and compose music. When you're in any of those meetings, if and anyone who's worked in any kind of a corporate structure will tell you, you are essentially wearing a mask and you're a very different person. So because you're taking, not only are you firstly taking decisions, you have to be alert enough to ask questions where and relevant questions where certain things, if they aren't working, you have to be able to probe and get to the bottom of it. So I don't recommend doing that. If you're going to do it, then be prepared to, firstly, you have to be able to train your mind to switch on and switch off. So that takes a lot of discipline and time. So if you're not disciplined in your first avatar, which is doing music, and if you're not very thorough in conducting yourself there, you're going to struggle with the other parts. So if you're good with that, with maintaining a discipline and keeping yourself together, then you'll be able to probably adapt yourself better on the other side. As far as my influences and where I got the germ to do this, I kind of come from I won't say I come from a business family. Honestly, my father was a filmmaker, and so he was a film producer, film director, and I honestly was not very equipped to do what I was doing when maybe even like 15 years back. So these are things that you learn on the job. You kind of learn by talking to people. You read a lot of, like you said, you read a lot of books. In fact, I would say that in the last 5 years or so, I have ramped that up quite a bit. And my interest in areas like investing and finance and those things. I mean, to be honest, in the last 6 months, I have done 2 courses in finance
Wow.
in this COVID time. I mean, this is something which is of my it's an interest of mine, and I finally found the time because there was so much of downtime in the last 6 months. I wouldn't be running to the studio every day, which is what happens when you're a composer who's being commissioned. You don't have time to do to think or to do other things or to pursue areas of your interest. So I was able to do that in these last 6 months. So in the last 4 5 years, I would say I have ramped up my reading and my understanding a lot more than I would say 10 years back. I think but to directly answer your question, the sooner you start, the better it is. Like start like tonight, and start by first asking, what are the areas where you have problems, which are your difficult areas, where are the areas which you struggle. So if you struggle in finance, for example, which honestly 99% of musicians struggle in, because it's not really our area of expertise, and spend time doing that. Just spend a lot of time reading, understanding. I mean, there are so many great portals where you can do courses now, Udemy and all these other places. And they're very cheap. I mean, I was actually blown away by how cheap some of these courses are. Like $500 to do a course, and there's a hell of a lot of information that they're sharing with you here.
Yeah.
And then of course there's books. So
So, do you do topic-based reading that I'm studying this particular subject, so I'll get all the books, or is it anything that interests you at that point of time?
Yeah, kind of. So like right now, I've kind of gone into a deep dive into like value investing. So that's which is basically Warren Buffett's school of investing. So I'm kind of reading as much, and I listen to a lot of podcasts. So I get like an hour every morning where I go off for a run. So 60 minutes I listen to, it's crazy. What the hell are we talking about? This is supposed to be a music podcast.
No,
We're
it's
discussing like investing.
it's important. It's
But
important. Everything's important.
so, so my morning is usually listening to, you know, all this stuff which I had ignored in my youth.
What is which podcast are you listening to mostly?
I've got a bunch of them on my podcast. I'll share it with you, and then you can just share it with everybody.
Sure.
So there's a bunch of them, and there are some great people who, and it's not just about finance. Actually, I also listen to a lot of business podcasts, which you find, people who are either hedge fund managers or CEOs of companies are incredibly intelligent. Some of them are very intelligent people, and especially people who are in business and finance together, like investors,
They are
because
extremely
they have,
creative, all of them. Extremely
yeah,
creative human beings.
yeah. Yeah, and I take a lot of inspiration. I take a lot of notes from the way they think. Actually, it's sort of more of, it's not so much about what you will learn from them directly, but it's more about how they think and how they look at life.
Mm.
So like for me, that is far more important now at this stage in my life. Is there another way of looking at things? Like, just think about the decisions that we've taken and where we've landed up. We took this decision in our late teens to become a musician. Most of us took it in our late teens, I'm presuming.
Mm.
And then we spent the rest of our life, essentially sharpening this one blade, because of a decision that we took very early in our life.
Mm.
And is there another way of doing it? Is a question that we should ask ourselves, every 5 or 10 years. Is there something else that could do with my life? Is there something else that I could bring to my life which could add value to what I already do? Which could create another revenue stream for me, or it could create indirect value to what I'm doing. I think that's an important question to ask
I,
anyone, whether you're a musician or artist.
even like just looking outside the the bubble of music, to use the word bubble, but thing is that there's so much happening outside in the business world, or even in the other creative aspects, be it graphic design, animation, and all. The way of their functioning. Like for me, the inspiration of building courses, building the School of Bass, it actually
Yes.
came from another person that I was studying a course with, and I was studying, I think, After Effects. That's what I was studying. The way he made things happen for me. Now I have no clue about how animation used to work, but I learned it. By the time I finished the whole
Yeah.
course, from
Yeah.
day 1 to day 20 or something, I was like, if I start applying for internship somewhere, 15, 20 days in, I'll be in that semi-professional, or a place where I can ask for money to do stuff. And this I earned
Yes.
by just giving 500 rupees to a course. And
Right.
rest was just the work I put in. But when I did one of his courses, then there was another course that the guy had made about how to make courses. That was the course. So I took that course, and it was so beautiful the way he explained why people learn, what they connect to, and how you need to actually manufacture your course, and how to actually, the whole thing in all this course building, being on the internet now, is you can't fool people anymore. That's just, it's out of
Yeah.
date. You can't keep fooling people. So you
Yeah.
have to provide real value. You have to genuinely want to help them. So whatever you talk about should be something that confuses them, and the answer to something is going to come out in the next year or next season of this course, something like that. They want immediate results, and that's what it works. So from this course, I learned how he works backwards. He'll take an example that in this video, we are going to achieve this. So you're already fired up that, hey,
Right.
whereas music education, the older way was, you keep doing this for 3 months, and then one day this will happen, something will happen. rather than,
Right.
working backwards. So that's the approach I am picking from there, that whatever I teach nowadays. So if there's a student of mine, private student, who wants to learn how do we slap, we first ignite it. We say that this is the song that we're going to play, and this is what you'll be able to do. So, and then we will start building backwards. But this understanding wouldn't have come if I wouldn't have stepped out of my zone, where I was following the traditional ways of how it's taught, how it's learned. And I think there's, of course, as you said, there's a lot of scope of as to how music can be taught. Recently, I was putting a lot of thought into how to explain how time is pushed and pulled. So I made a little grid. I put a bunch of kicks and snares. I put that video on Instagram, and I started moving the snare around. And then I took a song example that, okay, we have learned how time is pushed and pulled. Now
Yeah.
we will play it. So then, it comes together. It starts making some sense. Because I also feel that there's sometimes just too much theoretical aspects which are not needed. And for me, what happened was, and I know you also, you started as a singer and you studied Indian classical music for a while, and then you switched to Western music. So I, of course, wasn't a singer, but I did study classical voice. And what it did for me was, it gave me a very good ear. Like, it wasn't an issue figuring out where the sharp 4 is, sharp 11 is, flat 13 is. It wasn't an issue. And till
Yeah.
date, when I hear music, I hear it in Sargam. And when I was taught music, I wasn't taught so much solfege in Western academia, whatever I
One
learned.
taught it.
I wasn't really, it was called ear training. It was called ear training, and we were trying to do level 1, level 2, so
Yeah,
on and so forth.
but in your training, don't you cover like sight singing?
Yes, we do that. But if you think about the classical training methods, if you think
Very
about it,
different.
very different. And
Yes.
the amount of time you spent with just Bhairav and Yaman, it
Yes.
somehow anchors you in a way that everything related to that, around that, becomes very easy. Very, very easy.
Yeah.
Then the harmonic aspect, I could, like, still I spell out chords in my head in Sargam, but then of course, I express them in a language that the other person understands. So if I'm talking to a Western musician, then it'll be I'll say 1 flat 3 4 sharp 11, whatever I have to say. Was it a huge contributor in your musical journey because you came from the classical background and shifted to Western music?
So just to tie in something we were talking earlier, I just thought of it, which is what we are discussing right now, which is about Indian music. I think that lack of harmony in Indian music. So there is no harmony in Indian. There's modal harmony, yes, but essentially it's a melodic form of music.
Right.
And because you don't have to deal with anything else, but just the linearity of the notes going up and down, and essentially your entire study is of just the form in its linear form, and there's nothing else to deal with. That itself, that restriction, is what makes it incredibly deep. Because if you think about it, I mean, in Western music you have both axes. In Indian music you don't have that second axis, but still there is so much of study and there's so much of knowledge in Indian music, despite the fact that an entire axis doesn't exist. So, the fact that most Indian classical singers will spend their entire life just studying only the melodic contour of music. And of course, the rhythmic goes without saying. But having that restriction in place is incredible. Because you don't think about, you don't miss it. So sorry, I forgot what your question was. I lost your
No,
I lost your
I was
question.
asking how, if this classical aspect has helped you learn and process Western music
Oh, yeah.
faster and better.
100%. So I think because I spent so much time, not a hell of a lot, but I did spend a few years, 2-3 years, and then I continued to study after that, even through college. But I studied Hindustani classical first when I studied vocals, and then I went to Sultan Khan Sahab, and then I was studying with him for a little bit. But I think it trains your ears in a way that Western music can't, because you're doing essentially a deep dive in melody, and you do that for 3-4 years, and you're just doing that one axis, and you're hearing the space between the notes, and you spend so much time doing that in your means and in the way the note will, swell up and come back down. You spend enough years doing that, and you'll be able to hear, things. You immediately start hearing things differently. So, also in my composition, I think, and I've said this before, I think Indian composers, it's very challenging to be a composer working in Indian music, because you're asked to draw upon a well of Indian, all Indian music, whether it's, semi-classical, classical, or, pop, light classical music. And you're also asked to call upon, all the other stuff, which is outside Indian music. So I think it's super important to have both those foundational studies in place, so that you don't struggle later on in your life. You finish it off when you're very young. Like, get it done with. Like, finish it off. Because it's stuff you can finish off in a couple of years. You know what I'm saying? 2 years. You spend 2 years doing that. You're done with the foundational stuff, and then you fly. You'll be able to do more advanced stuff.
See, that's the difference I see, and in your narrative, that you talk about, let's get stuff done, let's finish, and let's keep going, let's keep moving forward. But then there are other narratives where sometimes in interviews you will hear that you're trying to understand Indian classical music in one lifetime. It's not possible, because when Tansen passed away, apparently he made a statement where he said that in this whole life of mine, I could only understand how a gur functions and what are the microtones around it. So,
by the way, by no way, I'm not suggesting even for a second that you be done with it in the sense that you will stop studying.
I get that. But the thing is,
I'm still a student of music, so I'm studying stuff and listening to stuff every day.
I get that.
Even today.
The only thing I'm mentioning and trying to make a point about here is that there is a burden that comes to your shoulders when you are told that this is something that is going to take a lifetime. Of course, we are trying to understand certain elements and aspects as to how.
Why should it be a burden?
See, when your eyes are on something else, like if a guitar attracts you a lot, and you're trying to.
I'm sorry. It's a terrible excuse, because if you're going to go and study to be a doctor, and if you want to, cut open somebody's heart and do a heart surgery, there's no way in hell they're going to let you go and do a surgery before you finish 9 years or 10 years old. So why do musicians expect to start, of being on stage and, becoming a rock star without putting in the foundational work?
No, I get that. The only point I'm trying to understand from you is that there are things that people are really, really gravitating towards. That, for example, in your life, there was a time when you really loved voice, then you really loved guitar, and you decided that I'm going to move towards this side. Now what happens sometimes is that to get a better understanding of harmony, you're told you must learn piano. Like, I didn't have a lot of love towards playing piano, for example, long back, but I practiced it because I was supposed to. And later on, when I reflect to that time of my life, it did feel like a burden. It doesn't feel like a burden now. Last year I spent a lot of time playing piano because I was gravitating towards it, and I progressed a lot in just 3 months, now being able to play all these songs that I always wanted to play. So that's what I'm trying to talk to you about, where sometimes to you, right, the way it's served to you, a lot of gyan is given about music in a manner that theory is going to take you for, and this style of music is going to take you forever to understand. Even the narrative of that you shouldn't play jazz because it's not part of your culture is something that I don't understand. I mean, of course, you'll not play jazz like an African or African American for that matter. You won't play it.
Does someone say that? Like, people say you should. Who says that? Like, you shouldn't play jazz. Who says that?
It's not you shouldn't play jazz, but it's more like you won't be able to sound like them, right? And when you're trying to half attempt something, right? Even if you're trying your best to reach that level that you want to transcribe, if you're learning trumpet, you want to transcribe that you sound, or you try to figure out what was the experience Chet Baker was going through. So I'm trying to execute that, right? But when it's served in a manner sometimes that...
So first, sorry. I just want to interject you here for a second. So I think the question should not be asked whether you can sound like Miles Davis or Chet Baker, but I think the question should be, what can you learn from Miles Davis and Chet Baker that you can make your own and that will help you sound like yourself? Because they already sound like themselves. The question should never be how well you can copy somebody,
Right.
but how well you can take the knowledge that they, or whatever that the music that they're playing, and make it your own. So, like for me, it's always been how well can I take what, whether it's, my earliest heroes, Scott Henderson or John Scofield or any of these guys, and I spent a lot of time, by the way, copying them. So you don't get me wrong. There was a point when I had to stop listening to them so that like, but I question should always be, what can you, and then already free. You freed yourself. Like, I'm not trying to sound like them. So
Right.
and it becomes your sound.
No, I think that clarity. Can you hear me, Dhruv? Can you hear me? Hello,
Yes.
hello. Yes. Yeah, I think that clarity is something that needs to be developed by the individual, whoever is trying to learn any art form. So here's the thing that used to happen in the Faculty of Music and Fine Arts where I used to study Indian classical music. So I did my music degree there. It was very strange. There was a class where one of the teachers, we were sitting in the class, and he literally told us in these words that all of you won't be able to do music or pursue music, especially classical, your entire life, because none of you come from a generation of musicians. Because your ancestors haven't done it, it's better you go look for another job. Now, if you are 18 years old, it's gonna hurt.
Yourself. So if you are going to do that, then you have to do it seriously. You can't do it ad hoc. And but I leaned on a lot of good people. So Kyuki, who manages my YouTube page, and Samir, who unfortunately passed away earlier this year. Great guy, incredibly helpful. They had just started their company, and I leaned on him, and they helped me kind of put, because I was new to this entire world. I had no idea how to do it. So I definitely leaned on him. And bunch of people who helped me out. So I think you have to take professional help from professionals, I guess, and talk to as many people as possible before you do it. Talk to people who are artists, who are your friends, or you talk to people who've done it before, and get as many insights as possible. Do not try and do it by yourself without talking to 50 people. So that's the advice I would give. Anyone who's about to release anything, and keep a 6-month window before you finished, when you finished your masters and when you release it. If it's an album, it's about 6 months. If it's a single, it's lesser than that probably. But if there are music videos and those kind of things involved, then those things need time to ramp up. And you know how it is. It just essentially takes time, because you have to build interest in people, and it does take a lot of time. So keep enough time to do all those things.
Yeah, but what happens is sometimes the musician is so tired after finishing this whole product creation that he's like, let's just put it out.
No, you can't do that. That's exactly what happened. I mean, with me as well. But I knew that I would have to, work with people who, have expertise in areas that where I don't have. And it was a great learning, So it takes the life out of you. Even if you lean on people and if you take help, it's a huge, massive undertaking, and it does tire you off.
How many hours a day are you working? Like generally, how many hours a day do you work?
The last 6 months are a terrible average, because it's been very, very low. My productivity has dropped a lot in the last 6 months. But on the flip side, I've spent a lot of time, studying and doing other things, doing various other things which I wouldn't have otherwise normally gotten time to do. But on a typical day last year, up to 2019, I usually work Monday through Saturday. Sunday I try and take off. I don't usually work on Sunday unless I'm called in, to do something, and if it's absolutely essential for me to be there. And then I usually try and be in my studio /office by about 10, and then I'll work till, if I'm working on my own stuff, I won't go beyond 5:36. So I try and I'm at a place where I can kind of manage that and keep that as a structure. But then all bets are off once I'm doing commission work, where I'm working for somebody else, because I'm often asked to stay back late sometimes in the studio because the voiceover was late or the mix has to be done that night. So it's a bit unpredictable when you're working with other people. But when you're working for yourself, you can kind of structure it in a way which kind of suits you. So I would say like 10 to 6, 10 to 7, maybe.
Nice. Very cool. Dhruv, this has been very interesting. And as I said, we'll do this in person also later on. Is there
Yeah, for sure.
anything you would like to add, anything you would like to suggest?
Uh, I think the only thing I would want to say is to young kids, because I'm at that age now where my friends' children come to me for career advice. So the only thing I would want to say is that build your career. Don't be in a hurry to get hits and become famous, because that is not what the music business is based on. I think you should see yourself in a 10-year, 20-year window. And the minute you start seeing yourself in a 20-year window and a 10-year window, you need a hell of a lot of fuel, in the back of your trunk to take you that long. So, and if you build your career and if you fill your well with enough knowledge and enough information, and you do your work in the early days in your career, you'll have a long career. And if you have a long career, you'll be successful. It doesn't, it goes along with it. So, follow that.
Very well said, man. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you. My pleasure, man. I'll see you soon.
Lots of love to you. We'll meet at some point.
Yes, I look forward to it.
Thank you, Dhruv.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you guys for coming. We'll meet next week. Today there was a lot of lag in the video. I'm sorry about that. Sometimes these things are not in my control.